Hello, and welcome back to Sonata She Wrote. This is part 3 of sonata cycles, my first stab at analyzing a complete symphony using sonata theory. I chose Haydn's 19th Symphony for a couple of reasons. First, I honestly just think it's a very cute symphony, sort of light and breezy, but with a little dark spot in the second movement. Second, all 3 of these movements are in sonata form. Now, that's not too unusual for Haydn, especially early Haydn, which this is, but definitely an outlier for most multi-movement works that we are familiar with. Having all 3 movements in sonata form lightens the load a bit in terms of comparing all the movements. Before we dive in, I do want to mention I've started a Patreon. If you can, feel free to join. I've set up a Discord, which you'll get access for at $1 a month. For $3 a month, you'll get the ability to make suggestions and vote on which concepts or pieces I analyze. And for $10 a month, you can get some help with your own theory homework. Once we have a few members, there will likely also be either some exclusive content or certainly some early access to videos. And I hope this goes without saying, but obviously there's no obligation to join. Feel free to just keep watching on YouTube and never think about this again. Now, let's get a little theoretical. What an exciting exposition! In the previous movements, a few things stuck out as unusual. First, obviously we had the gravitational pull of D major, what Hepokoski and Darcy call the prison house effect. In the second movement, we were shackled to D minor and couldn't escape even to D major with the S theme. Here, obviously D major is back, and as in the other movements, our transition and medial caesura require some extra attention. Remember, the 5 PAC, which we have here in this movement, in the medial caesura is a deformation, and for Haydn to include this in all 3 movements certainly calls for special attention. The transition of this movement is where we diverge a bit from the other 2. In the previous 2 expositions, Haydn began the transition by restating the primary theme and dissolving it into transition, but here the transition, at first at least, is its own beast. When S enters, however, it's obviously a fleshed out version of the sequencing motifs of TR. That's something this S has in common with the previous movements. Each of our previous secondary themes were based on material from the medial caesura. Although the first and second movement had P-based secondary themes, Hepokoski and Darcy point out that P or TR material is often found at the launch of S. And just to emphasize, remember, the P-based S is a first-level default for Haydn's own sonata strategies. So, in the exposition, we have a continuation of the 5 PAC medial caesura and our secondary theme based on P, or in this case, TR material. What is different is that the transition is not a dissolving restatement of P. Let's head into the development, where, remember, we're listening for the tonal goal of the global 6, in this case, B minor. We also want to know if Haydn uses material from only one side of the medial caesura, meaning just P and TR, or just S and C. If he uses material from both sides, the development would be fully rotational. In this development, which does first cadence in B minor, the global 6, Haydn again emphasizes the strength of the tonic D. Instead of returning to the major, as he did in the first movement, This time, Haydn spins towards D minor. The development becomes fully rotational when Haydn uses either TR or S material as a retransition to get us back into the exposition. Now, it was one thing for Haydn to place a separate movement in D minor, but remember, D major and D minor to classical ears are not that close together. We're going from two sharps to one flat, which is several moves around the circle of fifths, so this effect would have been very dramatic. Haydn's recaps are almost always different from his expositions, not a guarantee with all composers. Both Mozart and Schubert typically present almost identical material in the recaps, and Beethoven sometimes changes his recaps and sometimes doesn't. What was unique about the previous two movements and their recaps was that Haydn dispensed with the dissolving restatement of the primary theme as a transition, and instead opted for the P-TR merger, which to me sounds very organic as one theme gracefully becomes the other. Let's see what happens to the transition in the third movement. Haydn has completely cut the transition section in this recap. Now, obviously, a composer must almost always modify TR because the transition's function in the development is to modulate, and in the recapitulation, we typically say in the same tonic key. But perhaps because the transition in this symphony always ended in an unusual 5 PAC Medial Caesura, Haydn has solved this problem once and for all, not by merging the primary theme and transition, but dispensing with the transition altogether, allowing the P theme's cadence to function as a medial caesura and sounding the material of the transition within the S theme itself, considerably shortening the recapitulation of this movement. Haydn is nothing if not tidy. So there you have it. We've followed some threads through all three movements of this charming symphony by Haydn. The unusual treatments of the transition and medial caesuras, and the unbreakable connection to the tonic of D being the most notably different parts of all three movements. I hope in the future to present some larger works in this same style of sonata cycle analysis. Certainly Haydn's famous Farewell Symphony, as we can navigate through it using James Webster's text, but also some of the late Beethoven quartets are on the horizon as well. Thanks for watching Sonata She Wrote. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and feel free to leave a comment with your thoughts on this symphony or anything else.